to call this meeting of Senate Finance to order. And Mr. Thorley, could you please call the roll?
Senator Dennis. Here. Senator Kekeffer. Here. Senator Goycochea. Senator Hammond. Senator Ratty. Senator Severs-Ganser. Senator Cannizzaro. Senator Dondero-Loop. Chair Brooks.
Here, and we have a quorum, and will you please mark Senator Ratty and Senator Cannizzaro present when they arrive. And today on our agenda we have several items. We will be hearing 5 bills right now. We'll have 2 BDR introductions, and then we'll have a work session on bills that we hear today, possibly, and ones we've heard in the past. And then we will have public comment. We will start with Assembly Bill 189, and I don't know that I see anybody here in the room to present that. Maybe we won't start with that one. Well, seeing how we have nobody here just yet, I do see Mr. Sever, though, so let's go to Assembly Bill 477. And Assembly Bill...
Good morning, Chair and committee members.
Good morning, Mr. Sever. Yeah, we'll start with Assembly Bill 477, because that's one I believe you're going to present, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Yes. If you could, please present briefly. Just walk us through that bill and any fiscal impacts it might have.
Okay. Good morning, Chair and committee members. Sean Sever, Deputy Administrator from the DMV, for the record. Thank you for letting me present AB 477 to you. This is a budget cleanup bill that allows the DMV to transfer funds provided for the initial off-highway vehicle, or OHV, program implementation to the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, DCNR, for continued OHV-related purposes. The DMV was given $500,000 in startup funds for the OHV program during the 2009 legislative session, and budget account 4749 was created to receive the funds and track expenditures. The DMV has since completed the implementation of the OHV program and has been carrying the remainder of the funds in that budget account forward each fiscal year. The DMV is proposing to dissolve this budget account and move these funds to the OHV Commission. So we appreciate you considering our request and can answer any questions at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Sever. And I see no fiscal notes on this bill. And does the committee have any questions on Assembly Bill 477? Senator Goycochea?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious, what is the amount of the unexpended funds?
Over 26,000.
Sean Sever from the DMV. It's a little over $26,000.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Sever. And we'll go to any support here in the room for Assembly Bill 477. Nobody in the room. Can we go to the phones for any support for 477?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 477, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Once again, we are in support testimony on Assembly Bill 477. If you would like to testify, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. Can you see if we have anyone in opposition to Assembly Bill 477?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 477, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in neutral on Assembly Bill 477?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 477, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Well, that closes our hearing on Assembly Bill 477. And I believe we have up next, we could do Assembly Bill 482, which revises provisions relating to state business licenses. And I don't know if we have anybody from Secretary of State, if that's who would be presenting that. Mr. McAllister? You Are you going to present this bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Rusty McAllister, Nevada State AFL-CIO, and also a member of the Division of Industrial Relations Advisory Council, or Advisory Committee. So it kind of I ended up presenting this in the Assembly, so maybe I'll give another whack at it in the Senate.
It seemed to have worked in the Assembly, so I think it's going to do just fine over here.
The room doesn't have a lot of opposition, maybe, so we'll see. Mr. Chairman, member of the committee, this bill has been brought as a result of our actions on the Division of Industrial Relations in Advisory Committee. Each quarter when we meet, we are continuously given lists of businesses that have been fined and for not having unemployment insurance or workers' comp insurance. And so the list has become extensive, and every quarter they're submitting a list to us to approve to submit to the Board of Examiners to write off as uncollectible. The thing that kind of brought it to our attention, though, is that there's quite a few of these businesses that are still in business, and we're just being asked to write off the debt. And the debt's, in many cases, over 5 years old. Some of it's uncollectible because of statute of limitations. But to give you an idea of kind of how much that is, at our January meeting, they gave us a list of, the overall list was over $20 million of debt to write off as uncollectible. At our April meeting, they gave us a list and asked us to write off $1.3 million in uncollectible debt. And we looked, and a lot of those, a number of those businesses are still in business. And so we said, is there anything we can do here? And so they said, we've worked with the state controller's office on this. They need some teeth. It's already in statute that they can not renew a business license or not renew a license. This actually puts it in statute, though, and says that they could not renew a business license if there's debt owed to the state. We just felt it's, at a time when, any time when the state's looking for funds and we're being asked to write off every quarter over $1 million in debt that they've deemed to be uncollectible because, and yet some businesses are still in business, doing business, that it's not appropriate. And so we asked, I worked with Assemblywoman Carlton. She got this bill drafted, and we presented it in the Assembly and moved it from there. And here we are today to see if we can move this forward and try and help the state in their efforts to collect some of this debt that is owed by businesses that are not paying their fines. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions if I can.
Thank you, Mr. McAllister. And just in the hearing that you had in the Assembly, and I don't know that we have anyone on the line today, but do you know where the state controller and the state secretary of state's position were on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the committee, the Secretary of, Secretary of State's office was on the first hearing and offered up or suggested an amendment. That amendment has been incorporated into this bill in the first reprint to allow for renewing after the debt is basically, instead of suspending the license, or they would put it on hold until the debt was resolved through the Controller's office. My understanding is that the Secretary of State's office, the Controller's office, and the Division of Industrial Relations all worked and agreed upon the amendment that was put forth to address that concern.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Does the committee have any questions on Assembly Bill 482? All right, I'm seeing none. Thank you, Mr. McAllister, for coming in, and didn't recognize that you would be the one presenting this, so thank you for coming in and doing that. With no questions, we'll see if we have any support to Assembly Bill 482. Before I do that, it sounds like we have the Secretary of State's office on Zoom. I think it's Kim Parandi, and just wanted to get verification on that amendment. Broadcast services, do we have?
I apologize, Chair Brooks. We do not have.
Okay.
On Zoom.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for that. And so with that, we'll go to support on Assembly Bill 482. We have none in the room, so can we go on the phones?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 482, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in opposition to Assembly Bill 482?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 482, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Could you see if we have anyone in neutral to Assembly Bill 482?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 482, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. With that, we can close the hearing on Assembly Bill 482, and I will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 189. And we have Assemblywoman Gorlow here with us to present that, and that expands Medicaid coverage for certain pregnant women. And we are in the midst of an earthquake. All right, earthquake over, and you really make a entrance, Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Well, thank you very much. For the record, I am Michelle Gorlow, representing Assembly District 35, and I am really excited to be here, and I did not cause that. The goal of AB 189 is very simple. It's to improve the health of our women and babies. And it's going to do it by providing presumptive eligibility and also expanding coverage for lawfully residing pregnant women. Real quick, presumptive eligibility is women who are uninsured that would normally meet the Medicaid requirements would be allowed to receive care during the time their application is being processed. And that will allow them to get into early prenatal care. Because what happens right now is that if a woman finds out, even at 6 weeks, but it's usually closer to 7 or 8 weeks that we think that we're pregnant, and we start that process, it takes 45 days for Medicaid to approve that application. And that's assuming that all the materials are there, that she doesn't have a stale document or she's missing something. But even with those 45 days, that takes her out of prenatal or early prenatal care, which is between 12 and 13 weeks. So currently, we have a preterm birth rate of 10.7%, which is about 3,800 preterm births a year, with the average cost of preterm birth being $65,000 to $75,000. So we have Mr. Dwayne Young here to talk a little bit more about the fiscal, because I will go into policy and I can talk about that for a really long time. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Young.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Good morning, Mr. Young.
Good morning, Chair Brooks and the committee. My name is Dwayne Young. I am the Deputy Administrator for the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy, for the record. With me today is Lisa Swearigan, Chief of Eligibility and Payments for the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services. The medical costs that are exhibited here for the biennium total computable amount to about 1.8 million, or 600,000 of that being general fund. We have some system costs on the Medicaid side, and Ms. Swearigan will talk about the system cost on the eligibility side, as well as some actuarial costs, bringing the total computable for the biennium for both services in this bill at 1.9 million, leaving a state general fund amount of 713,856. This amount has been appropriated on the Assembly side, and so I'm happy to answer any questions regarding Medicaid and pause for Ms. Swearigan to speak to her fiscal note for the list.
Thank you. I
Dwayne.
appreciate that. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Chair Brooks, members of the committee, my name is Lisa Swearigan, for the record. I'm the Chief of Eligibility and Payments for the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services. We put a fiscal note on this. Mainly both of these asks would require system changes on our side. We would need to build a new portal for the presumptive eligibility piece for these qualified entities to apply for benefits. And then we would have to make a system change regarding the lawfully residing. Right now it would, citizenship is a requirement for eligibility. And so to disregard this for a pregnant woman would require a system change so that we would update the eligibility engine to disregard that. That being said, those two components would are estimated at 1.5 million. However, these funds are eligible for 90/10 funding through CMS. And so the general fund portion on that would be 150,900.
Thank you. So the entire fiscal impact to your agency would be 150,900, and that is over this biennium, but future biennium as well.
So we do not have a continued cost. This would be a one-time cost. Sorry, Lisa Swearigan, for the record. This would be a one-time cost to implement the system change.
Thank you. And
You're welcome.
Senator Kekeffer has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if we're disregarding certain eligibility standards, aren't we going to have more people eligible, and that would drive up actual medical costs?
Deputy Administrator Dwayne Young, for the record. Chair Brooks, through you to my senator, Senator Kekeffer. Yes, that is correct. And that is what is assumed within the fiscal note, is the actual medical cost of the additional months of eligibility for those who, and the capitation payments for those who would end up in managed care for the additional months that they are covered, either due to the presumptive eligibility. But what we ultimately hope, and we did look at some savings and had this discussion on the policy side, is that it will help to actually drive down costs on the back end for the women that we catch earlier to stop drop-in deliveries. There's a portion of NICU payments that we estimated savings from if we're capturing these women earlier in their pregnancy and getting them services. Right now, presumptive eligibility only exists in the hospital. And so if they don't know that they're eligible or encounter, an eligibility worker, they won't get those services till they actually deliver or end up in the hospital because of a complicated medical condition, which cost us more. And so this is about catching the women when they earlier at community providers when they need the services in order to save the state money in the long run.
Thank you for that. And is CMS actively waiving the 5-year rule in subsection 2 of section 1?
Deputy Administrator Dwayne Young, for the record. Senator Keffer, yes, CMS does not require a waiver for this. This is actually a SPA. And just for the committee's awareness, as I know you will know, in 2017, they allowed this provision for children and women. In 2016 at the federal level, in 2017, it was passed in AB 325, I believe, that would allow for the children to be covered. This is the portion just allowing for the moms to be covered. And this only requires a state plan amendment.
Thank you. And can you clarify what that general fund impact was one more time? I'm sorry, I missed it the first time.
The general fund impact across the biennium in both 3158 and 3243 is $713,000 and $713,000 roughly.
And that was continuing in the biennium?
Yes, across the both years biennium.
And future biennium?
I do not have the impact on the biennium readily available, but I can get that to the committee.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Any other questions for the committee? Senator Sievers-Gansert.
Thanks, Chair Brooks. Just a general question for Mr. Young. So we've had a number of bills, and we do every session for state plan amendments, and it just seems like we're always kind of chasing what is okay to have because other states have done it or federal code has changed. Do we have someone within the division who is analyzing, or do we hire consultants to review to see what we need to update? Because I feel like we're just always chasing it, and sometimes we're years behind. And this is these are federal dollars that can be brought in and help improve access to care.
Senator Sievers-Gansert, thank you for asking that question because it allows me to put this on the record. As the Deputy Administrator of Programs, I have teams across medical, behavioral health, pharmacy, direct recipient operations, and long-term services and supports. And so we have a process in which we work with other states, we attend national conferences, we work with stakeholders within the state, varying groups, recipients, and we develop strategic analysis on the types of services, the types of things that we would like to add to Medicaid and things that are on our dream wish list. What often happens and what happened, particularly this year during COVID, is that many things just could not make it into our budget. As we know, we prepare our budgets far in advance. And so we often work with stakeholder groups, legislators, such as Assemblywoman Gorlow, who has been working with us since last year to develop savings analysis, look at peer-reviewed articles, look at how other states maintain their savings. And so we do this, and that's why we provide the support in the policy and the fiscal committees for things. Many things that you will hear are often things that we could not get into our budget, but are definitely on our wish list. And so we continue to keep those lists and continue to welcome working with any stakeholders, across the state who know of services and cost savings, because most likely there's something that we've wanted.
Thank you. I appreciate that response because I think we all agree that we want to provide the best access that we can, and that we also want to be able to leverage our state dollars for federal dollars to do that. So thank you.
And if I just may, I should have said this, Sievers-Gansert, publicly thank you for the work that you did on SB 51, even though it was something that we cover. If the federal winds shift because we align to those, it allows us, that's an example that allows us to maintain services within our state if federal winds shift. So
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you for calling that out. I'm pretty excited about that. That's the one that we've continued coverage for the breast cancer 1 and 2 genetic mutations that are already covered through the feds. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on Assembly Bill 189 from the committee? All right. Thank you, Assemblywoman Gorlow. Appreciate it. And do we have anybody here in support of Assembly Bill 189?
Good morning, Chair Brooks, members of the committee. My name is Connor Kane, Connorcain, testifying today in support of Assembly Bill 189 on behalf of HCA. We have about 4,500 babies born every year at Sunrise Hospital. 80% of those babies are covered by Medicaid. The most vulnerable of those babies end up at our hospital's 72-bed NICU, which is the largest and most comprehensive in the region. And Deputy Administrator Young touched on this, but I think it's worth highlighting that one of the most significant problems that the hospital sees every day is the lack of prenatal care that many of the moms who come in receive. We support Assembly Bill 189 because we believe it could help lead to better outcomes for moms and their babies. We thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak today and encourage your support.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else here in support? All right, can we go to the phones and see if we have anyone in support of Assembly Bill 189?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 189, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. Do you have anyone in opposition to Assembly Bill 189?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 189, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Do you have anyone in neutral to Assembly Bill 189?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 189, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. With that, we'll close the hearing on Assembly Bill 189, and we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 196. And we are joined today by Majority Leader Teresa Benitez Thompson, and you can get started anytime you'd like. And this is a bill that requires courthouses to contain lactation rooms for use by members of the public under certain circumstances. Good morning, Assemblywoman.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate the time that you're giving to hear Assembly Bill 196. The bill does two big things. So first, it requires courthouses to provide lactation rooms. You can see the definition of what a lactation room is in Section 1, Sub 4, Part B. It is a room that is shielded from the view of others. It is free from intrusion by others and contains a chair, a working surface, and an electrical outlet. That electrical outlet's important because this is about providing members of the public a space to be able to express milk. And so for our members of the public who are pumping, you're going to need an electrical outlet. The second thing that the bill does is create a matching grant pool of a modest $50,000 to be administered by the administrator of courts, to be a matching grant program available to the courthouses, so that should they not be able to define or find a space within their courthouse that could serve as a lactation room, that they could purchase the lactation pods that are out there. The pods are, in the world of government funding, not that expensive. They're about $10,000 each. So the idea is, in the spirit of not creating a completely unfunded mandate, have the state be able to put in half of the dollars with the courthouse coming forward with the other half of it. We've done some work, and we think that there are about 3 to 5 different courthouses that might need to use this, so we think we've got an amount that is appropriate. Otherwise, we're just making sure that, especially with the courthouses planning to open back up, with the municipal courts moving forward with holding jury trials, that we're going to just need to have to think of this as much more of a public accommodations within our courthouses. And I am open for questions that you may have.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And I'll start off. What would be the procedure by which it would be determined where one of these goes, and then how would they petition to get the money from the state?
Thank you so much for the question to Chair Brooks from Assemblywoman Teresa Benitez Thompson. So if you look at section 1.5, that lays out the procedure. So we want to remember that the Administrative Office of the Courts doesn't come back to report to the Interim Finance Committee like other state governments do. And so we are going to trust them to set up their process for distributing these dollars. You do see that the local courts are going to have to provide proof satisfactory to the administrator of courts that they have got their pot of matching money, award them out, and then still in section 1.5 sub 3, you see the reporting requirements that the local courthouses are going to have to do back to the AOC on their expenditures. You also see language in subsection 2 that clearly states that additional costs to local governments regarding this provision can't be included in. So you can't, build, a space like this and call it a lactation room because it has an electrical outlet. So we tried to make sure that we had something tidy for you.
Thank you. And so this is just a $50,000 one-time allocation to the courts for this purpose. All right. Do we have any questions from the committee on Assembly Bill 196? Don't. Thank you. I appreciate that. With that, we will go to anyone in support of Assembly Bill 196. All right. Can we go to the phones and see if we have anybody in support of Assembly Bill 196?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 196, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 229, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Committee. I am Jamie Rodriguez. That's spelled Jamie Rodriguez. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for Washoe County. Calling in support of AB 196. Want to thank the Majority Leader for bringing the bill forward. Washoe County, the vast majority of our courts are already in compliance with this. That includes our District Court, our Reno Justice Court, and our Sparks Justice Court. We're very appreciative of the potential funding going forward, because we will likely need to find a creation for a space or the potential of a pod for our incline justice court, because currently they do not have space to allow for that use. So I want to thank her for bringing that forward, and we are very much in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have the next caller in support, please?
Thank you, Chair. We are currently in support testimony on Assembly Bill 196. If you would like to testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 018, please press star 6 to unmute. Thank you, caller. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Richards, Jennifer Richards. I live in Assembly District 27. I'm a lawyer and I am a mom. I'm very grateful to the Majority Leader for working with me as a constituent on this bill. And I just want to note that for me personally, it was a very difficult thing to think about going back to work and having the logistical wrinkle of how am I supposed to return to work, nourish my baby safely, comfortably, and with dignity. I think that this bill will promote access to justice. It will allow women, jurors, witnesses, and other court patrons to come to court and know that they have an appropriate, clean place to pump, that they will not have to pump in a dirty bathroom. And the matching grant will provide access for so many women. There are numerous health benefits for mom and baby to breastfeed. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that infants are exclusively breastfed for at least the first 6 months of life, and that should continue to the first year. For moms, that can reduce the risk of ovarian cancer, breast cancer, diabetes, and osteoporosis later in life. And for babies, it can significantly reduce childhood illnesses. However, despite all of these health benefits, at 3 months postpartum, over 60% of women in Nevada are no longer breastfeeding, and the rates plummet from there. That's because we face barriers, and this bill will help reduce those barriers. Thank you again to the Majority Leader for bringing this forward and promoting women and families.
Thank you. Do we have any other callers in support of Assembly Bill 196?
Thank you, Chair. Once again, we are currently in support testimony on Assembly Bill 196. To testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers in support at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in opposition to Assembly Bill 196?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 196, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in neutral on Assembly Bill 196?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 196, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Brooks, members of the committee. Joanna Jacob on behalf of Clark County. Just wanted to say we are neutral on this bill. We worked with the Majority Leader in the Assembly on this bill. Appreciate the amendments that was made in the Assembly Ways and Means Committee to allow pods or rooms to be placed at the location, because we have several locations in Clark County where multiple courts are in one location. So we will be able to find some flexibility where we have courts on campus. For example, the Regional Justice Center in Clark County or the North Las Vegas Justice Court shares space on a campus. So we will be able to designate a room by location. Also, there's flexibility for us for some of our outlying areas in Section 1 of the bill where it's not feasible or where there's just not space in some of our really rural parts of the Clark County. I believe that there's flexibility there. Made us neutral on the bill, and we want to thank the Majority Leader for her work with local government, especially during the course of her career. This is the last time I'll be able to testify on one of her bills, so want to thank her and our sincere appreciation and thanks. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Senator Dondero Loop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have a question. Can I insert one here?
You can ask it.
Okay. Good morning, Majority Leader. As I was listening to everything, I actually had a question about our rural courts and their very, much older buildings than, for example, the 8th Judicial Court in Las Vegas. So how will that process?
Thank you so much for the question through Chair Brooks to Senator Dondero Loop, Assemblywoman Teresa Benitez Thompson, for the record. And so what you see in Section 1 is you do see quite a bit of flexibility so that if they can find a space to define as a lactation room, then they can do that. If they don't have space right now where they can define a lactation room for their employees, because that's another law that was put on the books by your Senate Majority Leader, I believe in the 2017 session, then they wouldn't have to comply with this. So we think we've given a lot of latitude, but I also think that with doing the matching dollars for the lactation pods, if their space allows them and their or their lease allows them, depending on what kind of arrangement they have, then the lactation pods do come in 3 different sizes. And so there is a small one that if they determined could fit in their space, they would have matching funds to go after for that purchase.
Thank you very much. I just, as I processed the bill and then listened to a couple things, I thought about that, and I thought about, is 50,000 really enough? Not that we have more sitting around in somebody's pocket, but all those things started. So I appreciate that information, and thank you for the bill.
No, thank you so much. And I just want to say a quick thank you to my constituent, Ms. Richards, who you heard testify, because she brought me this bill, and she has stuck with it the entire time, and I know she's working, and she's been present for every hearing. So I just want to thank a great constituent for coming forward with a good idea and remaining so involved and active in this on this project. I appreciate her a lot.
Thank you, Majority Leader. And this might actually be the last time that you're testifying on a bill in front of me in the legislature.
I might have one more that hits you.
Oh, okay. I look forward to it. I'm sure it's going to be great.
But say nice things about me now. Go ahead.
And if you could hang on 1 second, and so we'll close the hearing on 196, and we'll take a very brief recess. All right, brief recess back. For once, it was an actual brief recess. So we are going to move Assembly Bill 256 to a later time, and we'll hear that when we hear that. And we will now go to a couple BDR introductions. And so at this stage in the game, I think what we're going to do, just so that we can make sure that we stay on schedule, but also have a conversation, I think we're going to introduce the BDR, but I think we're going to take a look at it and maybe walk through the policies of the BDR first, like we've done in some of the other money bills, and then introduce the BDRs so that when we come back to a hearing, it will be a more expedited process to hear that BDR. All right, so Mr. Thorley is going to hand those out, and then we'll take a look at them, and then we'll walk through them. And this will be a Senate BDR that we'll be introducing later today. So go ahead, Mr. Thorley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So committee members, you have before you BDR S1176, an act relating to financial administration and making appropriations to certain state agencies. This BDR contains appropriations to various state agencies and other organizations. The majority of the appropriations included in this BDR are what I would categorize as restorations. So these were budget reductions that were approved during the budget closing process. So cuts to general fund appropriations. So these, the appropriations, and again, I'll identify which ones are restorations and which ones would be new. But the majority of restorations and the dollar amounts in here generally reflect the dollar amount that was cut from the agency's budget during the budget closing process. So this would just be a restoration. Section 1 appropriates from the state general fund $389,399 to the Division of Public and Behavioral Health for community-based living arrangement services. This was a budget reduction that the money committees had approved, so this is a restoration of funding. In Section 2 of the bill, there's a general fund appropriation of $486,321 in each year of the upcoming biennium to the Division of Public and Behavioral Health for the rural clinics budget for psychiatric services. This is also a restoration of a budget reduction that was approved during the budget closing process. In Section 3, general fund appropriations of $892,500 in FY22 and $805,000 in FY23 to the Division of Child and Family Services for the fiscal incentive program for the Washoe County Child Welfare budget. This was also a budget reduction that was approved, so it would be a restoration. Section 4 is similar to Section 3, except for it's a budget restoration for the fiscal incentive program for the Clark County Child Welfare Services. The dollar amount in Section 4 that would be appropriated is $2.7 million in FY22 and $2.4 million in FY23. Section 5 includes an appropriation of $176,000 in each fiscal year of the 21-23 biennium to the Division of Public and Behavioral Health for the problem gambling account for gambling treatment and prevention services. This is also a restoration of a budget reduction that was approved during the budget closing process. Section 6 contains a general fund appropriation of $621,707 in each fiscal year of the upcoming biennium to the account for family planning created pursuant to NRS 442-725. Again, this is a budget restoration, so the dollar amount is equal to the reduction that was approved during the budget closing process. Section 7 contains general fund appropriations of $64,963 in FY22 and $65,106 in FY23 to the Division of Child and Family Services for the Children, Youth, and Family Administration budget for the Nevada Partnership for Training contract with the UNR School of Social Work. Again, a budget restoration. Section 8 contains general fund appropriations of $76,871 in FY22 and $78,987 in FY23 to the Division of Public and Behavioral Health for the Southern Nevada Adult Mental Health Services budget for office space and associated operating costs. This was, again, a budget reduction that was approved by the Money Committee, so this would be a restoration amount. Section 9 contains general fund appropriations of $2.5 million in each fiscal year of the 2021-23 biennium to the Division of Public and Behavioral Health, to the chronic disease budget account for vaping prevention activities. This is a result of a budget reduction not approved by the Money Committees this session, but approved during the 31st special session. Section 10 includes general fund appropriations of $61,205 in FY22 and $63,855 in FY23 to the Division of Public and Behavioral Health for the Healthcare Facilities Regulation budget account for community-based living arrangement services, again, the result of a budget reduction approved by the money committees this session. Section 11 includes general fund appropriations of $1,089 in FY22 and $2,129 in FY23 for the Division of Public and Behavioral Health for the healthcare facilities regulation budget account for the replacement of equipment. This is also a restoration of, would also be a restoration of budget reductions approved by the money committees this session. Section 12 includes general fund appropriations of $25,000 in each year of the upcoming biennium for the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs for the Nevada Humanities budget to support the Nevada Humanities program. This is also a result of a reduction, so this would be a restoration of funding to the program. Section 13 contains general fund appropriations of $750,000 in each year of the upcoming biennium to the Department of Education for the Nevada Institute on Teaching and Educator Preparation Program. This was a budget reduction and was not recommended for restoration in the executive budget. So this amount would restore funding for that program. Section 14 contains general fund appropriations of $213,771 in both years of the upcoming biennium to the Nevada System of Higher Education for the Cooperative Extension Service budget for travel and operating costs. This dollar amount ties to budget reductions that were approved by the money committees this session during the budget closing process. So again, a restoration. The next sections, sections 15 and 16, contain general fund appropriations that are not the result of the budget reduction or restoration process. These are recommendations for new funding. Section 15 contains a general fund appropriation to the legislative fund of $124,182 in FY22 and $129,272 in FY23 for the personnel costs of 2 security scanner positions for the Nevada Legislature. These would be 2 new positions. Again, this is not a restoration. Section 16 contains general fund appropriations to the legislative fund of $302,596 in FY22 and $5,925 in FY23 for personnel, travel, and operating costs for 3 positions for the Nevada Senate. These would be 3 new positions. This is not funding that was recommended or approved as a reduction during the budget closing process. And then lastly, Section 17 makes a change to NRS 218A.605, and the change is actually on page 14 of the BDR, where you can see the new language. And this change would allow during a special session and with the approval of the Secretary of the Senate or the Chief Clerk of the Assembly, an employee of the legislature whose service is required may be paid an hourly rate and compensated for overtime in the same manner as provided for employees of the Legislative Council Bureau. So that's the new language in subsection 7 there. And then section 18 says the act becomes effective on July 1, 2021. And happy to answer any questions that the committee might have. As the chair mentioned, this will be introduced as a Senate bill and will be referred back to Senate Finance.
Thank you. Senator Severs-Gansert.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. So I'm looking at section 2 for psychiatric services in the rural clinics, and I'm looking at Section 13, the Nevada Institute on Teaching and Educator Preparation. I'm just kind of wondering if there's an opportunity to trade items like that out with federal dollars eventually. Like, we're allocating it now, but we're starting, well, we have some guidelines, but they're not totally honed. But both of those, I think, could be, I understand there's restorations, and I think the other one for 2 and 13, I think, might be a restoration as well. But I think there's a direct correlation between, for example, Section 13, the teaching and educator prep that will be happening because we're going to be catching up on COVID and probably will heavily influence what those programs look like over the next 2 years. And then also just looking back at Section 2, the psychiatric services in the rurals.
Senator Severs, Gansert, Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal. Fiscal staff does anticipate that once the federal funding is received, the state and local fiscal recovery funds from the American Rescue Plan, that there will be a number of general fund expenditures identified in the budget that are eligible for reimbursement. And a similar process that took place after the passage of the CARES Act will take place once this money is received. And again, we have received some guidance, and staff will continue to look at that. And I do anticipate some reimbursement. Not sure if these 2 particular items will qualify, but definitely I believe there will be general fund reversions as a result of reimbursements from federal funding.
Thank you. And would that process look like something that would come before like IFC? Are we setting it up to so we can trade funds out through the interim committee?
Wayne Thorley for the record again. Correct. It would go through, during the interim, when the legislature is not in session, it would go through the IFC process. Again, similar to what occurred last interim with the CARES Act funding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Severs Gansert. We are going to be very busy in this IFC. I look forward to seeing all of you over the summer and into the fall. And so I don't even have to, we won't even have to pack our bags. We'll just be right back in this room, or probably 4100. Senator Kiekefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got questions on a couple sections. So Section 8, restoration of office space. As I recall that discussion, that was not a particularly problematic budget cut. Maybe I'm misremembering. I don't recall this one.
Yeah, Senator Kiekefer, give me 1 second, please, and I'll pull up my spreadsheet.
And Senator Kiekefer, I recall the hearing on that as well, and then subsequent conversations with the agency. While it wasn't going to be a significant disruption of service to Nevadans, it was going to be a significant disruption of operations for the agency. And so, while prioritizing things that they could live without and cutting of the budget, this didn't necessarily, they thought that they could continue to provide services, but restoring this office will help the continuity of the operations of the agency.
Okay, and that's helpful. If there were some further discussions after we close it, that I think helps explain. And it's 150 grand, so it's not a big deal. In Section 9, Mr. Thorley, regarding the vaping money, indicated that it was a cut from the special session. So was it not in GovRec? Or was it not I'm trying to understand the flow.
Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. Senator Kiekefer, this cut took place, the $2.5 million budget reduction took place during the 31st special session, and there was not a recommendation in the executive budget, in the budget presented by the governor, to restore this funding.
Okay. And the tax that we created on vaping in the last session, just remind me, I can't remember, is that a general fund revenue source, or is that going to a specific account?
Senator Kiekefer, for the record, Alex Hartz, that was a general fund revenue source.
And thank you for that. And then I think the other one was in Section 13. I don't think I understood. I might have been reading the previous paragraph when you got there. Is that also a cut that we made in the from GovRec?
Senator Kiekefer, Section 13 with the funding for the Nevada Institute on Teaching and Educator Preparation was not, it was a budget reduction from the special session. So similar to the prior item we just discussed, it was not recommended for restoration. So it was not an item where the money committees took an action to reduce the budget this session.
Okay, and then what's the total dollar figure in the bill? If you don't have it offhand, I can add it up.
The total dollar amount is $9.4 million in 22 and $8.3 million in 23 for a total of $17.7 million over the biennium.
It's all general fund?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions from the committee on this BDR 1176? And I plan on, when we hear the bill, or the bill at that point, kind of going through it as quickly as possible. So this would be a good time to ask a question if you have it, but obviously you might have to digest it for a little bit before we have any more questions. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thorley. And I think we can, with that, take an introduce a motion to introduce this BDR. I have a motion from Senator Dennis. I have a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. All right, motion passes with the members we have present, and we'll introduce this later this morning. All right, so next agenda item, since we don't have our bill presenter on the other bill we have on the agenda, and no more, we have one more BDR, that's right. All right, thank you. So now we have in front of us BDR 1177 relating to state financial administration making contingent appropriations and authorizing disbursements relating to certain federal money and providing other matters properly related thereto. Mr. Thorley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. I will be walking the committee through BDR S 1177, and then certainly happy to answer any questions the committee members might have after I present the bill draft request. Section 1 of the BDR instructs the chief of the Governor's Finance Office in consultation with the Senate and Assembly Fiscal Analysts of the Fiscal Analysis Division of Legislative Counsel Bureau to, as soon as practical, after receipt of the money from the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds that are going, this is the $2.7 billion allocated to the state as part of the American Rescue Plan Act. The Section 1 instructs the GFO and LCB Fiscal to first determine the reduction in general fund revenue to the state as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic using the formula set forth by the U.S. Treasury Department in the interim final rule that they have published. And then after that amount of lost revenue has been calculated, again following the formula in the guidance that was received by the U.S. Treasury, that the amount of that lost revenue would be transferred to the state general fund. On page 2, in section, subsection 1B, again, there's a transfer of the lost revenue would go to the state general fund, and then upon transfer to the state general fund, the bill would appropriate $401 million to the account to stabilize the operation of state government, which is also referred to as the rainy day account. The dollar amount, the $401 million, is the exact dollar amount that was transferred out of the rainy day fund shortly after the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then in a subsection B2, an appropriation from the state general fund. Again, this is general funds that are the result of lost revenue calculation of $11.4 million would be made to the legislative fund for facilities improvements to the legislative building, unless a separate bill is otherwise approved by the 81st session of the Nevada Legislature. Then in subsection 2 of section 1, I'm on the middle of page 2 of the BDR, the bill begins to go through a list of what we've referred to as a waterfall list of allocation of coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. First, under 2A, would be $335 million to repay the loan that the state has received from the federal government for the UI, Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. Then in 2B, a disbursement of $2.9 million for the public health emergency, including without limitation mental health treatment, substance use disorder treatment, or other behavioral health services, and construction costs and other capital improvements in public health facilities. Then on page 3, this is subsection 2C, an allocation of $7.6 million to address food insecurity resulting from the negative economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then subsection 2D says disbursement for any other purposes authorized for the use of money received by the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. And then lastly, section 2 of the bill draft request makes the bill effective upon passage and approval. Happy to answer any questions that the committee might have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll kick it off with one question, and it's section 1, sub 2. D, last page, last sentence before the effective date. Disbursements for any other purpose authorized for the use of the money received from the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. Is that intended to cover any other purpose? That's a pretty blanket statement. Some of the rest of this is pretty directed and makes sense. Well, some makes sense, some doesn't. But is that a blanket enough statement in an appropriation that then anything that would be brought forth as a work program using coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds could then be approved by the IFC?
Mr. Chair, Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. That is staff's understanding. If you go to the top on the previous page and the beginning language in subsection 2, which is the leading language, It instructs the chief of the budget division, so this is Director Susan Brown with the Governor's Finance Office, to allocate coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 353 of the Nevada Revised Statute. So this is the State Budget Act. So it would, any allocations that are made pursuant to 2D would have to be made following the provisions of the State Budget Act. So if the allocations exceeded the thresholds for going to IFC, for example, for a work program, they would have to do that. As far as the language in D, that's kind of the end of the waterfall. So there's the prior sections outlining the priority, and then D simply states any other authorized purpose, so authorized under the American Rescue Plan Act.
And in the construction of this BDR, does it appear as if all the other provisions have to first be met before the later provisions can even be considered?
Wayne Thornton for the record, LCB Fiscal. That's correct, Mr. Chair. So the items listed in the bill draft request are listed in priority order. So the funding would go first to those, in order of the items listed until Section D, where there's no dollar amount listed. And it's just as authorized.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Senator Kiekhaefer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So some of the numbers are very specific, right? So if we start with the rainy day fund transfer, is that the amount that was transferred out during the special session?
Yes, Senator Kiekhaefer, that's correct. That is the dollar, that's the exact dollar amount that was transferred out of the rainy day fund to the general fund in FY 2020.
Thank you for that. In subsection 2, paragraph A, the $335 million, is that the currently anticipated loan amount from the federal government to fund state unemployment benefits?
Senator Kiekhaefer, that's correct. The exact dollar amount of the loan as of a few days ago, I believe, was it was in the $332 or $333 million range. So the $335 million in here is, that dollar amount was crafted to cover the entire loan amount that the state has received from the federal government for the UI Trust Fund.
The next couple items, we've had hundreds of millions of dollars plugged into our public health infrastructure through directed funding streams since, over the past year. How did we land on $20,900,000 for that paragraph?
Senator Kiekhaefer, Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal. So the $20.9 million is a total dollar amount of anticipated expenditures, or eligible, I should say, expenditures that staff receive from the Department of Health and Human Services for various items that are related to the pandemic and aren't being funded elsewhere.
If you could provide that list, I'd appreciate it. And then, I guess, same question about the food insecurity item. There's been, I think, there were $12.5 billion for food insecurity in the ARP. How do we land on that number?
Similarly, Wayne Thorley for the record, Senator Kiekhaefer, that dollar amount was a dollar amount that was based off of anticipated eligible expenditures for this purpose.
So eligible expenditures that we haven't budgeted, right? They're not in the budget, and we're going to refund this. This is additional expenditures on top of what we budgeted for.
That's correct.
All right. And then just to be clear again, this only relates to the funding that we get from revenue, from this revenue loss calculation, or do does the waterfall incorporate all money that we receive through the ARP?
So, Senator Kiekhaefer, thanks for the question, and that's a good point, and some clarification I'll provide on that. I should have been more clear on this. So section 1 has 2 subsections. There's subsection 1, and then there's subsection 2. The items in subsection 1, so this is on page 1 and then halfway through the second page of the bill draft request. And there's 2 items in there, the transfer to the rainy day fund and then the transfer to the legislative fund for facility improvements. Those 2 transfers would occur out of the lost revenue. So the lost revenue would be calculated. The total amount of the lost revenue would be transferred to the general fund. And then these 2 appropriations would come out of the general fund for those 2 items. Beginning in subsection 2 of section 1, so this is the remainder of the bill, these allocations would not come from the amounts identified as lost revenue. These allocations would be made directly from the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds.
All right, thank you for that clarification. That helps. Do we have an estimate yet as to lost revenue calculations? I know the formula is complicated. I looked at the guidance and then stopped. I didn't even try.
Senator Keycaffer, we don't have a good estimate, a firm estimate at this point that I feel comfortable putting on the record.
Okay.
We're still reviewing the formula also, and it's based off of several criteria that is making things a little bit complicated. What I can say is we're very confident that the minimum amount of lost revenue that we can identify under the formula more than covers the items in the 2 items that are related to lost revenue, the transfer to the rainy day fund and the transfer to the legislative fund.
And so any other, any excess that we identify ends up in our general fund is cash on hand?
Correct.
And would cover maybe the $20 million we're spending in the other BDR we just heard?
It would be, yes, it would be unappropriated, unrestricted general fund revenue.
All right. I'll stop, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I appreciate the leeway.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Well, I'll jump back in for round 2 then. So when I look at, it would be section 1, sub 2. It would be B and C. Similar to the question that Senator Keycaffer had on the 20 million, 21 million for mental health treatment, substance use disorder and other behavioral services, construction costs and other capital improvements in public facilities to meet COVID-19 issues, and then also a disbursement of 7.6 million to food insecurity. So those 2 things, those 2 line items come out of, well, not the lost revenue piece of the $2.78 billion that go to the state for the general fund purposes. They still come out of the state's $2.7 billion of state general fund monies that could help in the state general fund. In all, I think the state's getting something like $7 billion of coronavirus ARP funding, and the majority of that is actually going directly to cities, municipalities, school districts, institutions of higher education, but also through to our HHS agencies and through directly to food banks and things like that. So it's, do we have any sort of insight into what additional federal funds within the ARP are going to those same agencies to do those same things that we are allocating general funds to?
Senator Brooks, so you are correct. The $2.7 billion that will be coming to Nevada from the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds is only a portion of the total dollar amount that the state will be receiving under the American Rescue Plan Act. Staff does not at this time have a complete list of all the different funding sources in the American Rescue Plan, but can put that together and get that to the committee.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And similar to the list of things that I'm assuming HHS provided to come up with a number of $20.9 million. Has a list been provided to us on a disbursement of $7.6 million to address food insecurity?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Any other questions from the committee on this BDR? All right. Seeing no other questions, I would take a motion to introduce BDR 1177. I have a motion from Senator Dennis and a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. And motion passes with the majority of the members present, or all the members present. And we will introduce this, hopefully see this on the floor later. And with that, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong is here, and we can present Assembly Bill 256. Assembly Bill 256 is, well, we'll just let the Assemblywoman explain to us what Assembly Bill 256 is. And you can go right ahead whenever you're ready.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman Brooks and members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Chandra Summers Armstrong, a representative for Assembly District 6 in Clark County. Today, we are bringing to you Assembly Bill 256, which would allow the payment of doula services, which are non-medical support services, to expectant moms and to be paid for by Medicaid. We have talked extensively in front of the Assembly, as well as your Senate Health and Human Services Committee, about the need for this legislation, especially considering the epidemic of mothers' mortality of Black and brown women across the nation. And our numbers in Nevada are a little high, and we just want you all to know that this is an important piece of legislation, and it is a cost savings piece of legislation. So I come to you as the face and the cheerleader and the emotion, but you have a very capable advocate when it comes to the financials on this bill with Mr. Dwayne Young of the Department of Health and Human Services, and I think he's the best person to speak to your concerns today, which are the finances. Mr. Young?
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Armstrong. Do just want to, Chair Brooks and the committee, do just want to highlight in the fiscal note that in budget account 3243, we have projected a savings. And so and the most direct and clear-cut way to explain this is there's a savings when demonstrated in other Medicaid programs across the country that when a doula is involved, the recipient is most likely to be educated, supported, and to have a vaginal birth versus a cesarean birth. And so if we were 6% of the women were to take advantage of those services, of doula services within the state, a very modest calculation, and those women were to be coached and supported earlier in care and to have a vaginal birth, we would see savings within the state. The only direct cost is in budget account 3158, and that is for system changes. In the Assembly, within the back language, there is appropriation of this bill to allow us to come back to, at a later point, to front the system hours and then transfer the savings from the medical category at IFC back to our administrative category to cover those in system enhancement hours. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So of course we want to make sure that we can help.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Do we have any questions from the committee for
those outreach efforts and the Navigator programs that we've seen?
We have a little bit of feedback happening. There we go. Do we have any questions for Mr. Young from the committee or for Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong? Senator
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. So, Mr. Young, I looked on the fiscal note. It looks like you're anticipating sort of on the expenditure side, a billable rate of like $350 for the doula service. Is that sort of a unit cost per client, per birth, or is that averaged out over a group of billable services that they provided? It seemed like a low number based on what I've seen in terms of the amount of or costs generally associated with doula services.
Deputy Administrator Dwayne Young for the record. Senator Keffer, thank you for the question. This was actually based on a bundled rate that Oregon pays. The $350 accounts for 6 visits, some prepartum visits, some coaching during the delivery, and then some postpartum visits as well. And so this is a rate that is bundled. Our rate to Oregon would be comparable. And so that is how we came to this calculation of that rate. Of course, as you know certainly well, a final approval of rate and adjustments could be made by CMS, but it's best to calculate our rates off of rates that are already approved by CMS.
Thank you, Senator. Do we have any other questions from the committee, either of the bill sponsor or for Mr. Young? That's it. Thank you, and thank you for bringing this bill. And it really does seem like it not only will improve in health of mother and child, but in saving some money.
Thank you so much for your time, and I'd like to just also let you all know that this was brought to me from one of our community advocacy groups called Make It Work Nevada. They interviewed over 1,000 moms about birth outcomes, and they were really the force behind this, and I'm really proud to be here to talk to you about it and to let you know that this was a community-centered piece of legislation. So thank you.
Thank you. They did great work, and so I'm glad you brought this. Thanks. So any other questions? All right. We will go to support of Assembly Bill 256 then. And I don't see anybody in the room, so we'll go to the phones, please, for support for Assembly Bill 256.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 256, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone in opposition to Assembly Bill 256?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 256, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Great. Do we have anybody in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 256?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 256, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. With that, we can close our hearing on Assembly Bill 256, and that will wrap up the bills that we're going to hear this morning in our first episode of Senate Finance today, and also our BDRs that we're going to introduce. And we can move to work sessioning on some bills that we've heard earlier, and we'll take a very brief recess while I confer with staff on the work session stuff. Okay, we are ready to jump into our work session when the committee is ready and the staff is ready. All right. If Mr. Thorley and Mr. Hartz, if you want to let us know which bills we will be bringing up for work session right now, and we will track those and we can get started.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. There's going to be several bills, so I'll go through the list slowly. The majority of the bills are one-shot appropriations that are included in the executive budget. And then some of the bills that the committee just heard this morning. So, starting with the one-shot appropriations, these are bills that were heard previously, and these are all assembly bills. Assembly Bill 451, 453, 454, 455, 456, 457, 458, 460, 461, 462, 464, 465, 466, 467, 468, 469, 470, 474, and 475. We'll also be presenting Assembly Bill 484 for work session. Assembly Bill 484 was heard Monday morning in joint full committee. This is the bill that Speaker Frierson presented with the allocation of the federal funds for DETR, for the Deployment, Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation. That was the bill hearing on this. We did not have a separate bill hearing at Senate Finance.
What is that number again, Mr. Thorley?
Assembly Bill 484. And then, Mr. Chair, from the bills heard today, AB 189, AB 196, AB 477, and AB 482.
All right. Let the one-shot Assembly Bill marathon begin. Start with Assembly Bill 451.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 451 was heard on May 20th. The bill makes an appropriation to the Office of the Secretary of State for replacement computer hardware and software. The total dollar amount of the appropriation is $2.5 million. The bill was presented by Secretary of State Barbara Sagaski, and testimony was provided that the funding would replace desktop computers, printers, servers, and storage and networking devices. There was no testimony in support, opposition, or neutral. There were no amendments provided. If the committee wishes to move this bill, the motion would be do pass.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Any questions on Assembly Bill 451? All right, seeing none, I'll take a motion from Senator Dennis to do pass, second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes, and we will assign the floor statement to Senator Gokachia. I'm just going to go in order here. And up next, Assembly Bill 453.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 453 was also heard on May 20th. Director Susan Brown presented the bill. This bill provides funding to the account for pensions for silicosis, diseases related to asbestos, and other disabilities in the amount of $34,000 for the 21-23 biennium projected expenditures. There was no testimony in support. There was no testimony offered in opposition, nor was there testimony provided in neutral. This bill is effective upon passage and approval.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Do we have any questions on Assembly Bill 453? All right, seeing none, I have a motion from Senator Dennis to do pass, and a second from Senator Don Darrow Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with those present, and we can go to, we will assign that floor statement. I will take that one, and we will move on now to Assembly Bill 454.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 454 was also heard on May 20th. This bill was also presented by the Director of the Governor's Finance Office, Susan Brown. This bill makes an appropriation to the Nevada Promise Scholarship account in the amount of $7,328,366. There were two callers who offered testimony in support. There was no testimony provided in opposition, nor was there testimony provided in neutral. This bill becomes effective upon passage and approval as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Any questions on Assembly Bill 454? Seeing none, I have a motion from Senator Dennis to do pass. I have a second from Senator Don Darrow Loop. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. That motion passes unanimously with those present, and that will go to, the floor statement will go to Senator Dennis, and that takes us to Assembly Bill 455, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 455 was heard on May 20th. State Controller Catherine Burden presented this bill. This bill makes an appropriation of general funds to the Office of the State Controller in the amount of $18,848 for the replacement of check printers. There was no testimony offered in support, nor was there testimony offered in opposition or in neutral with regard to the bill, and this bill becomes effective upon passage and approval, and if the committee wishes to pass this, it would be due pass.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hartz. Any questions on Assembly Bill 455? Seeing none, I have a motion from Senator Dennis to do pass, and I have a second from Senator Don Darrow Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with those present, and I'll sign the floor statement to Senator Kieckhofer, please.
Mr. Chair, the next bill for work session is Assembly Bill 456. This bill was also heard on May 20th. The Division of Aging and Disability Services Administrator Diener Schmidt explained the request to the committee. This bill proposes to make a general fund appropriation of $85,750 for pavement maintenance at the Jones campus of the Desert Regional Center in Las Vegas. The purpose of the pavement maintenance is to meet ADA requirements. If the committee wishes to approve this request for $85,750, the motion would be due pass. There was no testimony provided in support, nor opposition, nor in neutral. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Do we have any discussion or questions on Assembly Bill 456? Seeing none, I take a motion to pass. I have one from Senator Dennis and a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present, and we will assign that floor statement to Senator Hammond, please. And next up, we have Assembly Bill 457.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 457 was heard on May 26th. It was presented by the Division of Forestry. This bill proposes to make a general fund appropriation of $637,890 to the Division of Forestry of the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources for deferred maintenance projects at the various Division of Forestry locations. There was no testimony offered in support, nor in opposition, nor in neutral. This bill becomes effective upon passage and approval. If the committee wishes to pass it, it would be due pass.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Any questions on Assembly Bill 457? Seeing none, I would take a motion to pass. I have one from Senator Dennis, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. And motion passes unanimously with the members present. We will sign that floor statement to Senator Dondero Loop. And now we can go to Assembly Bill 458, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 458 was heard on May 20th. The bill makes an appropriation to the Real Estate Division from the General Fund of $693,670 for an update to its licensing and software system. The bill also appropriates general funds of $37,654 for the replacement of computer hardware and software with the Real Estate Division. The bill was presented by Administrator Chandra with the Real Estate Division. No testimony was provided in support, opposition, or neutral. There were no amendments presented. The act becomes effective upon passage and approval. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Any questions on 458? All right, seeing none, I take a motion to pass for Assembly Bill 458. I have a motion from Senator Dennis, second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present, and that floor statement will go to Senator Ratty. And next up, Assembly Bill 460.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 460 was heard on May 20th. It was presented by Mr. Mitch Varner, representative from the Division of Museums and History of the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs. This bill proposes to make a $100,000 appropriation to restore the school bus program, to reimburse transportation costs for public school students to visit state museums. There was no testimony provided in support, opposition, or neutral when the bill was heard. Excuse me. Mr. Chairman, there is a proposed amendment that was brought to staff's attention by our colleagues for the Assembly Ways and Means Committee. They have indicated to us that this bill was supposed to be amended to include an additional $100,000 to restore the amount to $200,000, which is the amount that has previously been approved in prior biennium for this program. If the committee wishes to consider the amendment to add $100,000 in general fund appropriation to increase this to $200,000, the motion would be to amend and do pass if the committee so desires.
Any discussion on this bill or the proposed amendment from our friends at Ways and Means? None? Okay. All right, I would take a motion to amend, do pass. I have a motion from Senator Dennis, men do pass, second from Senator Don Darrell Loop. Any discussion on the motion? School buses, school buses, school buses. All right. All right, and so all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. And motion passes unanimously with the members present, and we will sign that to, who's in order here? Senator Severs Gansert. All right, up next, 461.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 461 was heard by the committee on May 20th. The bill makes an appropriation from the State General Fund to the Office of the Attorney General in the amount of $96,000 for the cost of replacing standard glass windows and doors with ballistic glass and frames at the Carson City office. The bill was presented by Jessica Hoban with the Office of the Attorney General. She testified that this funding would be used to replace windows and doors in the entry area of the Carson City office, as well as the executive conference room. All the windows and doors are the ones that would be facing Carson Street. No testimony was provided in support, opposition, or neutral. There were no amendments presented on the bill. The bill is effective upon passage and approval. Mr. Chair, if the committee wishes to move the bill, the motion would be to do pass.
Thank you. Any discussion on Assembly Bill 461? All right, I have a motion from, seeing none, I have a motion from Senator Dennis, do pass. A second from Senator Don Darrow Loop. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present, and we will assign that to Senator Goicoechea. Up next, Assembly Bill 462.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 462 was heard on May 20th. The Department of Corrections presented the bill to the committee. This bill makes various general fund appropriations to the Department of Corrections. The first appropriation is included in Section 1. It proposes to make a $2,189,808 appropriation for the upgrade of the department's offender management system. Section 2 of the bill on page 2 proposes an appropriation of $1,436,720 for the reintegration of the offender sentence management system into the Nevada Offender Tracking Information System. Section 3 of the bill appropriates $247,012 for replacement cameras and storage area network equipment. Section 4 appropriates $102,747 for the replacement of commercial ovens at the High Desert State Prison. The total amount of the appropriations recommended in this bill are $3,976,287. There was no testimony offered in support, opposition, or neutral. If the committee wishes to pass this bill, it would be do pass.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Any question on Assembly Bill 462? Seeing none, I have a motion from Senator Dennis to do pass. I have a second from Senator Don Darrow Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present, and we will assign the floor statement to Senator Dennis. Yeah. Up next, Assembly Bill 464, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 464 was heard by the committee on May 20th. The bill was presented by Susan Brown, Director of the Governor's Finance Office. The bill restores various fund balances for various contingency accounts for the upcoming biennium. In Section 1 of the bill, makes an appropriation from the general fund to the stale claims account of $3.6 million. In Section 2, the bill makes an appropriation from the general fund to the emergency account of $239,791. In Section 3, the bill makes a general fund appropriation to the reserve for statutory contingency account of $12.1 million. And then in Section 4 of the bill, there is a general fund appropriation of $13.7 million to the contingency account. In working with the Governor's Finance Office after this bill hearing, there is additional funding that the committee may wish to consider allocating to the contingency account, the dollar amount identified in Section 4, which is the IFC contingency account, related to two items. First, the Department of Taxation will have to issue refunds as a result of the lawsuit, the two-thirds lawsuit. The Department of Taxation is estimating at this point costs related to the overtime and other costs for issuing the refunds of $267,500. And then the other item that staff has identified is an additional $2.5 million set aside in the reserve portion of the contingency account for the Nevada Division of Forestry for access as needed if expenditures on wildfires over the interim exceed the amounts that are budgeted. The committee, if the committee wishes to move forward, they may wish to appropriate $267,500 and then $2.5 million to the IFC contingency account as restricted funds to be allocated to the Department of Taxation and the Nevada Division of Forestry on request from the IFC. There was no testimony in support, opposition, or neutral. If the committee wishes to move forward with the amended dollar amounts to the IFC contingency account as restricted funding, the motion would be to amend and do pass.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Any questions on Assembly Bill 464?
I'm sorry, Chair, could I just hear the amended dollar amounts one more time?
Certainly. The amended dollar amounts would go into Section 4. Currently, as drafted, the bill has $13.7 million to the IFC contingency account in Section 4. The amendment would add $267,500 to that amount, set aside in the reserve portion of the IFC contingency account for the Department of Taxation, and an additional $2.5 million, again, as restricted funding in the reserve or in the contingency account for the Nevada Division of Forestry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Any other questions on 464? And I have a motion from Senator Dennis to amend with the stated appropriations and do pass as amended. Did I do that one right? Awesome. And I have a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. All right. Passes unanimously with the members present who sound like they're running out of steam on me. And we will assign that one to, I'll take that floor statement, please. And then that brings us to Assembly Bill 465.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 465 was heard on May 20th. This bill makes an appropriation to the Division of Water Resources of the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources for the repair and maintenance of South Fork Dam. The Section 1 of the bill contains the appropriation of $2,119,308. The bill was presented by the acting state engineer There was no testimony in support. There was no testimony provided in opposition or neutral, and this bill becomes effective upon passage and approval. If the committee wishes to pass this bill, it would be do pass.
Questions? Take a motion. Get a motion to pass from Senator Gokachia, second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. That one gets assigned to Ben. You got to get up and do a little dance.
Protect Carla.
All right. Let's go to the next one. 466, right?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Assembly Bill 466 was heard on May 20th. The bill makes an appropriation to the Department of Corrections in the amount of $15.8 million for hepatitis C treatments for offenders. The bill also in Section 2 makes a general fund appropriation to the Department of Corrections in the amount of $196,523 for new and replacement medical and dental equipment at state correctional facilities. The Department of Corrections was having technical difficulties during this portion of the bill hearing, so they did not make a presentation. However, there were no questions from the committee members at that time. There was no testimony in support, opposition, or neutral on the bill. There are no amendments. The bill is effective upon passage and approval. If the committee wishes to move forward, the motion would be to do pass.
Questions on the motion on the 466? All right, I will take a motion to do pass from Senator Brooks, second from Senator Dondero Loop. Further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay, we're going to 467. Oh, that one's getting assigned to Scott Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next bill is Assembly Bill 467. This bill was heard on May 20th. Ms. Felicia Denny from the Nevada Department of Transportation presented the bill. This bill makes, as shown in Section 1, this bill makes a general fund appropriation of $2,614,908 in general fund for the continuing costs of the replacement of the Nevada shared radio system. In Section 2 of the bill, it makes a general fund, or a highway fund, excuse me, appropriation of $19,398,147 for the continuing cost of the replacement of the Nevada shared radio system. This bill becomes effective upon passage and approval. If there was no testimony offered in support, neutral, or in opposition when the committee heard this bill. If the committee wishes to pass it, the motion would be do pass.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Do we have any questions on Assembly Bill 467? Seeing none, take a motion to do pass. I have one from Senator Dennis, second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously of the members present, and we will assign that floor statement to Senator Dondero Loop, please. And that brings us to Assembly Bill 468.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 468 was heard on May 20th. The bill makes an appropriation to various divisions of the Department of Motor Vehicles for the replacement of computer hardware and software and various other equipment. I'll briefly go through there are several sections of the bill, so I'll go through them very quickly. In Section 1, the bill makes, and these are highway fund appropriations too, unless I state otherwise. So Section 1 makes a highway fund appropriation to the Division of Information Technology and DMV of $23,677 for the cost of replacement of the Duo DigiPass security application and a UPS battery backup unit. Section 2 of the bill makes a highway fund appropriation to the, also to the Division of Information Technology of the DMV in the amount of $645,078 for replacement computer hardware and software. Section 3 makes a highway fund appropriation to the Motor Carrier Division of the DMV in the amount of $38,916 for replacement computer hardware and software. Section 4 makes a highway fund appropriation to the Division of Field Services of the Department of Motor Vehicles in the amount of $561,647 for the replacement of credit card readers, scanners, shredders, fax machines, and a stylus marking system. Section 5 makes a highway fund appropriation also to the Division of Field Services of the DMV in the amount of $61,614 for replacement barcode scanners. Section 6 makes a highway fund appropriation also to the Division of Field Services of the DMV in the amount of $745,632 for the replacement of computer hardware and software. Section 7 makes a highway fund appropriation to the Division of Compliance Enforcement of the DMV in the amount of $51,874 for replacement computer hardware and software. Section 9 makes a highway fund appropriation to the Director's Office of the DMV in the amount of $42,408 for the replacement of computer hardware and software. And lastly, Section 9 of the bill makes a highway fund appropriation to the Administrative Services Division of the DMV in the amount of $46,888 for replacement computer hardware and software. The bill was presented by Sean Sever with the Department of Motor Vehicles. There was no testimony in support, opposition, or neutral. There is a proposed amendment from the DMV. The committee may recall during the various bill hearings that have occurred in this committee that the Department of Motor Vehicles will often include in their fiscal note that the full impact of the proposed legislation would not be known until the cumulative effect of all legislation was more known. Now that the department has a better idea of which bills are going to make it out of the session, they have estimated that they would need additional MSA programming hours that would amount to $615,000 or $615,643,000. This would be an additional highway fund appropriation in addition to the 9 sections of Assembly Bill 468. And again, that would be for MSA programming hours, Master Service Agreement. If the committee wishes to, the bill is effective upon passage and approval. If the committee wishes to move forward with the bill with the amendment to add an additional $615,643 in highway fund appropriations, the motion would be to amend and do pass as amended. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, committee, do we have any questions or conversation on Assembly Bill 468, especially that amendment? Senator Kiekeffer?
So how many different bills are adding up to the total of $467,000 in need for programming? Mr. Chair, or Senator Kiekeffer, looks like 8 bills. Have we passed them all?
I'd have to double check on that. I assume some of them have not passed all the way through the process.
Mr. Chairman, it would just be, I think, appropriate in future years to have these come through on the piece of legislation specifically so we can evaluate them on a case-by-case basis rather than holistically, but that'll be your job.
I 100% agree, and I will never in my career in this building or in IFC, or I guess in this building, look at a fiscal note again that has that sentence on the bottom of it. We get 8 bills that had 0 fiscal note on them, and with some generic language on the bottom that now lead us to have to be forced to make a decision on day 117 to allocate $670,000 or 700, whatever that number was, to the Department of Motor Vehicles. That is nonsense. And so here we are. So the alternative here would be do pass without amending it, and then DMV would have to come to IFC and make the case for every single one of those in the contingency account. Is that the alternative?
Mr. Chair, generally, there's not a lot of highway fund
Oh.
placed in the highway fund portion of the contingency account. Therefore, in light of the concerns you're voicing at the moment, if you wish to approve this dollar amount, staff would recommend you could put it in the contingency account, and then as the bills are in fact passed and approved by the governor, based on actual need, the department could approach the contingency account. There is not enough funding otherwise generally placed highway funds for this purpose.
I think that's a great idea. I'm not exactly sure how to say that in a motion, but that's a great idea. Senator Kekeffer, you want to give it a shot?
I'll give it a shot. What, can you give me the dollar figure again, total?
It's at $615,643.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I would move to amend and do pass with the amendment appropriating $615,643 from the highway fund to the IFC contingency account highway fund portion for allocation to the DMV upon their application for release of those funds based on specific project needs.
I have a motion from Senator Kekeffer, a second from Senator Ratty, and any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion passes unanimously with the members present. And I will assign that floor statement to me, since I have such strong feelings about it. That brings us to Assembly Bill 469.
Mr. Chair, Assembly Bill 469 was heard on May 20th. It was presented by the Secretary of State to the committee. This bill makes a supplemental appropriation to the Office of the Secretary of State for a projected shortfall related to credit card processing fees. The amount being appropriated is $549,998. This bill is effective upon passage and approval. If the committee wishes to approve it, the motion would be due pass. Testimony was not offered in support, opposition, or neutral.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Do we have any discussion on Assembly Bill 469? All right, seeing none, I would take a motion to pass. I have a motion from Senator Dennis to do pass, a second from Senator Don Darrell Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion on the motion, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with those present, and we will assign the floor statement to Senator Ratty. You're up. And that brings us to Assembly Bill 470.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 470 was heard by the committee on May 20th. The bill was presented by Administrator Chandra with the Real Estate Division. The bill makes a general fund appropriation to the Real Estate Division in the amount of $481,920 for a projected shortfall relating to timeshare filing fees, which Director Chandra testified were negatively impacted as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. No testimony was given in support, opposition, or neutral. The bill is effective upon passage and approval. If the committee wishes to move forward the bill, the motion would be to do pass.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Any questions on Assembly Bill 470? All right, seeing none, take a motion do pass from Senator Dennis, second from Senator Dondero Loop. All in favor, oh, excuse me, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with those present, and we will assign the floor statement to Senator Severs-Gansert, please. And that takes us to Assembly Bill 474.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 474 was heard on May 20th. It was presented to the committee by Welfare and Supportive Services Division Administrator, Mr. Steve Fisher. This bill makes a general fund appropriation to the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services in the sum of $17,472,208 for continuation of the Technology Modernization Project for the Child Support Enforcement Program. This bill also authorizes the expenditure of federal funds in the amount of $34,316,638 over the biennium, again for the continuation of the Child Support Enforcement Modernization Project. This bill is effective upon passage and approval. There was no testimony offered in support, opposition, or neutral when the bill was heard.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Do we have any questions on Assembly Bill 474? All right, seeing none, I would take a motion to pass. I have a motion from Senator Dennis to pass. I have a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. And that motion passes with the majority of or unanimously with those present. And we'll assign that floor statement to Senator Gokachia, please. That brings us to Assembly Bill 475.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 475 was heard by the committee on May 20th. Susan Brown, Director of the Governor's Finance Office, presented the bill. The bill makes an appropriation from the general fund to the Millennium Scholarship Trust Fund in the amount of $42 million to support the Governor Gwynn Millennium Scholarship Program. Director Brown testified that this amount will cover the anticipated cost of the program for the upcoming biennium. Testifying in support of the bill was Kent Irvin with the Nevada Faculty Alliance, Amanda Brazu with on behalf of NSHE, Saber Newby on behalf of UNLV, and Tyler Hugh with the College of Southern Nevada. There was no testimony in opposition or neutral. There are no amendments. The bill becomes effective upon passage and approval. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Do we have any questions on Assembly Bill 475? All right, seeing none, I would take a motion to pass. I have one from Senator Dennis, and I have a second from Senator Dondero Loop. And any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with those present, and we'll assign that floor statement to Senator Dennis, who's incredibly excited about that. And we'll now go to our last work session item of this first episode of Senate Finance this morning, and that's 484, Assembly Bill 484.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 484 was heard by the committee in joint full committee, as previously mentioned, on May 24th. The bill was presented by Speaker Frierson. This bill proposes to make a authorization in the amount of $54 million to the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation for purposes of upgrading its the department's unemployment compensation information system. Testimony was provided as to how the funds would be used and the needs by Director Caffaretta. There was information presented is that the funding would be partially used for immediate short-term needs to stabilize the existing system. There was discussion of system replacement costs and the time frame that would be expected. There was discussion of reporting to the legislature in terms of the progress by the department in expending the funds and upgrading the system. There was 2 individuals testified in support. There was no testimony offered in opposition, and there was no opposition, or there was no testimony offered in neutral as well. This bill is effective upon passage and approval. If the committee wishes to pass it, Mr. Chair, the motion would be do pass.
Thank you. So do we have any questions on Assembly Bill 484? All right, I do not see any. So I'll take a motion to pass. I do have a question on the motion or a question. Okay, I have a motion to pass. Second, a motion from Senator Dennis, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? And I think I have some discussion from Senator Severs-Gansard. No. Okay. All right. Sorry. So seeing no discussion on the motion, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion passes unanimously with those present. And I will assign that floor statement to me. And so I believe that is the last work session item we have ready for us right now, the last bill we have ready for us right now. And we will continue, we'll be coming back a little bit later, and I'm not exactly sure when a little bit later, but you know how these last couple days are. And so with that, I can recess. Oh, are you prepared to do the other, for we can do those later today when we come back? Are you ready? Oh, in that case, let's do those. Okay.
Assembly Bill 189 was heard this morning, presented by Assemblywoman Gorlow. She provided testimony on the bill, indicated that the bill would establish presumptive eligibility for Medicaid for certain pregnant women. Dwayne Young with the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy provided testimony on the fiscal impact as it relates to the division. Lisa Sweargen with the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services also provided testimony on the costs related to the Welfare and Supportive Services Division. The fiscal impact is contained in the bill. So as the bill came out of the Assembly, it was amended to include certain appropriations. Section 2.3 and 2.6 of the bill contain general fund appropriations to the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy for the projected medical service costs associated with the bill, and also the information system and actuarial costs associated with implementing the act for the Healthcare Financing and Policy Division. That totals $713,836 in general fund appropriation between those two sections, sections 2.3 and 2.6. Section 2.9 contains a $150,900 general fund appropriation to the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services for the costs of information system changes and training associated with the provisions of Assembly Bill 189, and that covers the fiscal impact that was discussed from Lisa Sweargen. There were no proposed amendments presented. The act becomes effective on July 1, 2022. Testifying in support was Connor Kane. No testimony in opposition or neutral. And happy to answer any questions if the committee has any questions on the bill or the fiscal impact.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Any questions on Assembly Bill 189? All right, seeing none, and the motion would be do pass. Is it amend do pass?
Do pass as amended.
Do pass as amended, thank you. Motion would be do pass as amended. We have a motion from Senator Dennis, a second from Senator Don Darrow Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present, and we will assign that floor statement to Senator Ratty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next bill is Assembly Bill 196. This bill was also heard this morning. It was presented by Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson. This bill proposes to require courthouses to have a lactation room, and it lays out the requirements for such a space in Section 1 of the bill. Section 1.5 of the bill provides that that courthouses can apply to the office of the administrative office of the courts for a grant of funds that are contained in Section 1.5, in which a general fund appropriation has been included in this bill for $50,000 for the purposes of making those grants. The grants is noted in Section 1.5, subsection 2. Grants are made contingent upon matching funds being provided by the court. This bill is, Section 1.5 becomes effective on July 1, 2021, and Sections 1 and 2 of this Act otherwise become effective on January 1st, 2022, to allow time for the lactation rooms to be either constructed or put into place. If the committee wishes to pass this bill, the motion would be do pass as amended. There were two callers in support. I apologize, Mr. Chair. There was no testimony in opposition, and there was testimony offered in neutral. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Do we have any questions on Assembly Bill 196? And seeing none, I would take a motion to do pass as amended. I have a motion from Senator Dennis, a second from Senator Don Darrow Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present, and I will sign that floor statement to Senator Don Darrow Loop. And if we could go back to 189, I'd like to assign that floor statement to Senator Don Darrow Loop as well, as a co-sponsor of the bill. And that brings us to our next Assembly bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 477 was heard this morning by the committee. The bill was presented by Sean Sever, Deputy Administrator with the Department of Motor Vehicles. The bill abolishes the Department of Motor Vehicles revolving account for the assistance of the department, which provided funding to carry out the provisions and the law relating to titling and registration of off-highway vehicles. The bill also requires the state controller to transfer any unexpended balance in the account to the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources account for off-highway vehicles, which is an account used for to fund the Commission on Off-Highway Vehicles and grants for projects relating to off-highway vehicles. Mr. Sever indicated that a little over $26,000 would be transferred from the DMV account to the Commission on Off-Highway Vehicles account. There was no testimony provided in support, opposition, or neutral. There were no amendments proposed. The bill is effective upon passage and approval. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Do we have any questions on Assembly Bill 477? Seeing none, I would take a motion to pass. I have a motion from Senator Dennis, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Do we have any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present, and I would like to assign that floor statement to Senator Hammond, please. He looks excited about it. And that brings us to our last Assembly Bill of the morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assembly Bill 482 was heard by the committee this morning. Mr. Rusty McAllister presented the bill. This bill proposes to require that the Secretary of State shall suspend a state business license if the state controller has informed the Secretary of State pursuant to subsection 5 of Nevada Revised Statutes 353C that the holder of the state business license owes a debt to an agency that has been assigned to the state controller for collection, and the holder has not otherwise satisfied the debt or entered into an agreement for the payment of the debt or demonstrated to the state controller that the debt is not valid. This bill then also lays out the process by which the Secretary of State shall, or in the conditions, shall reinstate a state business license that was otherwise suspended pursuant to the conditions that were previously noted. This bill is effective on July 1, 2021. There was no testimony offered in support, opposition, or in neutral. There was testimony indicating that in January, the amount of debt that was being proposed to be waived in January by the State Board of Examiners was $20 million, with an additional $1.3 million proposed to be deemed uncollectible in April. If the committee wishes to pass this bill, Mr. Chairman, since this is the first reprint, the motion would be to do pass as amended.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hartz. Any discussion on Assembly Bill 482? Seeing none, I have a motion from Senator Dennis, do pass as amended, second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on that motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. And motion carries unanimously with the members present. And I'll assign that floor statement to Senator Dennis, please. And that is all of our items on bill hearing this morning and on BDR introduction and on work sessions. So we will recess and come back later this afternoon to take up other business at the call of the chair.